Thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar that is part of our e-commerce and digital marketing series. Innovate Hawaii is part of the Hawaii Technology Development Corporation, HTDC, which is a state agency attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, whose mission is to grow the tech economy and workforce in Hawaii. Innovate Hawaii is the state's NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center, which supports small and medium-sized manufacturers to enhance their productivity, growth, and technical performance through programs and services across the islands. My name is Nicole, and I am a project engineer here at HTDC Innovate Hawaii. Some housekeeping items before we dive into the webinar. This session will be recorded and will be sent to all who registered. And we are in webinar mode, so your cameras and microphones should already be muted. And feel free to send in your questions during the session through the Q&A function. So today we have Laura Wigod, Creative Director at Monomeans Communications, who will be talking about all things branding. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Laura to take the lead for today's session. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in for this webinar on branding. As Nicole mentioned, my name is Laura Wigod. I am the Creative Director at Monomeans Communications here in downtown Honolulu. I spent most of my life in Silicon Valley, and I moved to Hawaii 3 years ago. And I'm here because I love Hawaii, and I'm really excited and honored to be able to help Hawaii companies. So without further ado, let's launch into my presentation. Thank you for your patience. So every presentation has to start with a definition, right? So branding is really very simple. It's the marketing practice of creating a name, symbol, or design that does two things. Number one, it identifies and differentiates your product or service from other providers. And secondly, reflects your company's personality and values. In order to be a successful brand, you have to have four basic elements: consistency, adaptability, uniqueness, and universal appeal. Coca-Cola is a really excellent example of consistent branding. They represent happiness, togetherness, refreshment. Some of their campaigns have included, I'd like to teach the world to sing, have a Coke and a smile, and those happy polar bears. So Coca-Cola is always consistently refreshing and happy. And there's also consistent use of their script. You won't see that maybe on the Coke cans, but when you see that script, even if it's in another word, you know it's Coca-Cola. McDonald's is famous for its adaptability. Because they're all over the world, they have to adapt their menu to represent the locals. So for instance, in Canada, they've got poutine. India has mixed spicy paneer. And in Japan, there's wasabi shaka shaka, which is their French fries. And the shaka shaka is the sound of the French fries being shaken in their little container. Lyft has unique branding. They have that distinctive hot pink for their logo, which you have seen, like when they first opened, they had huge furry hot pink mustaches on the front of all the drivers' cars. It was really it really stood out. Now they have a smaller version that sits on the dashboard. Lyft does city murals, all their ads, everything includes that hot pink, and it's always upbeat and distinctively Lyft. And then our last example over here is Nike for their universal appeal. They've made an effort to appeal to men, to women, to grown-ups, to seniors, to children. You don't even have to hear any of the text or understand the music or anything to get what Nike's trying to do with its brand anytime you see any of their ads or commercials. So first of all, we're going to go into the elements of branding. The first one is tone. So the tone of your brand voice is the unique style that you use to communicate your target audience and your values. And you'll do this through words, personality, and emotion. Over here on the right, you'll see a spectrum of brand personality traits. So you can choose to go to either end of that spectrum with your branding or somewhere down the middle. At the top, we have feminine and masculine. In 2022, we're still having this conversation. I'd like to see that go away. I'm not even sure what either of those things mean, but I'm sure you do know what it means when it comes to branding. Playful versus serious or professional. You can go from luxurious to affordable, from modern to classic, youthful to mature, loud to subdued. So when you're sitting down to talk about what your branding is, the first thing you want to do is decide what your brand is going to be as far as your personality. Words are a really powerful tool when you're branding, or actually, as I'm sure you know, in any aspect of your marketing. Coming up with them can be tricky. Once you've established tone, you can start to think about the vocabulary you're going to use in your branding. This is a really great list of words that I found from Sumo that will help you pick out vocabulary when you're writing for your marketing. And I know that sounds maybe a little simple or basic, but the truth is when you actually sit down to do marketing writing, it can be a little challenging sometimes. And the same words might come to your mind over and over, like, oh, that's awesome. And you don't want to use awesome a million times. So I really depend on thesaurus.com when I'm writing to help prompt my brain into coming up with more creative words than the ones I'm used to or the ones I use in my own speech. So when you're going to write, this is a wonderful reference for writing. Your personality should come across in your branding. And these are really 4 great examples of personality in branding. You've got Old Spice, smell like a man. So if you've seen any Old Spice ads, you know they're hyper masculine. I just said we want to kind of get rid of that binary approach to gender. But in this case, I feel like they've taken that concept and made it satirical. So when we think masculine, you can take it seriously or you can have a lot of fun with it. And I think Old Spice does a really good job with that. HTDC has a former cohort called Goddamn Man Company, and they sell beard products. And they are a perfect example of another company that's doing masculine and funny. Harley Davidson, strong and confident, right? Live your legend. So you're not going to see pink maybe in a Harley Davidson motorcycle ad, and they are consistent with their branding. They're strong, confident, and independent. So, you know, that's a Harley rider. Down here in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got Coke, and there they are teaching the world to sing because Coca-Cola represents happiness, and they're always positive and friendly. So they are very, they stick to their brand really well. The bottom right-hand corner, we've got MailChimp. I don't know if any of you do emails, newsletters, or any kind of marketing through MailChimp, but MailChimp's branding is always clear and helpful, but it's also funny. So for instance, if you've ever sent out an e-blast through MailChimp, just before you hit send, you get this little animation of the chimp pressing the red button, and because they know you're a little nervous. You're about to send everything out to the world, and you know you might have made a mistake or whatever's going to happen. It can be nerve-wracking. So I really appreciate MailChimp adding that level of humor to what they do, because otherwise it's a very straightforward and professional experience. So it's great that they've thrown that in there. They're also known for using a lot of original illustrations. And as an illustrator myself, I always appreciate seeing what they're up to next. Emotions. So emotions are a huge factor of all marketing and especially your branding, because this is how people are going to engage with you. On the right, what you're seeing here is a wheel of emotion that was developed by Roger Plutchik in 1980. He was a psychologist, and he came up with what he felt were 8 basic emotions, which you'll see on the inner portion of the circle. So we've got ecstasy, admiration, terror, amazement, grief, loathing, rage, and vigilance. And his theory, and a lot of people use this in branding and marketing. So his feeling was that initially a person experienced a stimulus, which is followed by a cognitive response, then an emotional response, then behavioral response, until finally you have an effect. So an example right here is you encounter an antagonist. Your cognitive response tells you you're in danger. Then your emotion kicks in with fear. Your behavioral response, if you're a bunny rabbit, might be to run away. And then you move forward to figuring out what it is you're going to do next. He also felt that there were some basic emotional pairings. So if you take a look at the wheel, and you'll see joy and sadness are opposite each other on the wheel. Trust and disgust are paired, fear and anger, surprise and anticipation. And the way that you might use this wheel is to think about combinations. So if you look at the top, in the center, we've got the word joy. We all know what joy means, right? And just to its left is anticipation. So if you're trying to convey a feeling of joy and anticipation in your customers, then you want to use optimism to convey those emotions and get that effect. So you can follow any point of this wheel to explore how you want to express feeling through your branding. This is a really fascinating aspect, but we're not here to talk about psychology. So feel free to look it up. There's a whole article on Wikipedia about this, but it's really very interesting. The next element of branding are taglines. So I'm sure you're familiar with most of these. Can you hear me now? Melts in your mouth, not in your hands. A diamond is forever. Tastes so good, cats ask for it by name. There are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there's MasterCard. So you're all familiar with what a tagline is. And it's not necessary that you have them, but a lot of companies do. If you do want to create a tagline, there are some basic things you need to keep in mind. It should be positive and it should be memorable. And here are some other tips and examples of what you should include if you're going to create a tagline. First of all, keep it simple. Nike, just do it. It doesn't get much simpler than that, but you know what they're trying to say. It's very clear and very simple. Next, we have Apple. And in this case, you want your tagline to give it meaning. So when Apple came out with Think Different, it was because they wanted to convey that their company was different from all the others and that they were separating themselves from the pack and distinguishing what their niche was in their industry. The next tip is to make your tagline clear. Toyota, let's go places. That's very clear. Let's go places. That's what cars do or vehicles do. So you want to, again, keep it simple, give it meaning, make it clear. Something else to factor in if you're writing a tagline is to focus on your benefits. Dollar Shave Club says, shave time, shave money. So right away, they're letting you know what it is they do. And I think we can pick up on what tone they have for their branding, which is obviously to be funny. So it's very clever and it's very memorable and it conveys exactly what it is they do and how you're going to benefit from their product and service. And then finally, feel free to include your business end goal. Disneyland's tagline is the happiest place on earth. Now, when they came up with that tagline, they had just begun. So it was more of an aspirational tagline and very hyper confident, but it turned out to be true. So sometimes your tagline can also be your own goal. One thing that's important to remember is that it's okay to change your tagline. Here is Coca-Cola. In 1886, when they came out, they were known as delicious and refreshing. And soon it became drink Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola revives and sustains. At first, Coca-Cola was seen as almost medicinal. Then 1906, we've got the prohibition, and suddenly their tagline is the great national temperance beverage. And I'm not going to read them all out loud to you, but as you go through, you can see how many different times they've changed and how comfortable they felt doing that. And Coca-Cola is doing just fine, and their branding is solid. So you should feel very free to change it up. There's nothing wrong with that. It's your business. You can do what you like. You do want to make sure that you are maintaining your tone. I don't think that you want to start out as serious professional and then suddenly become funny. So feel free to change your tagline as long as you're sticking to your basic parameters that you've settled on. I'm assuming, of course, at this point that you have a strategic marketing plan in place and you already know the kind of feeling that you want to convey to your potential customer base. Down in the left-hand corner of this screen is a nice little link from Shopify. If you already have a Shopify account, you're probably familiar with Shopify, but this is open to anybody. But they have a great little tool for creating a slogan maker. So that could be something that you play around with. Generally speaking, when it comes to creating a tagline or anything, I recommend that you have a great brainstorming meeting surrounded by people. You don't want to just stick this on yourself. Creativity comes from being able to connect things that are not necessarily connected immediately in your mind. And the more people you have around you, that's more input, more connections, and more divergent thinking. So some rules for brainstorming are that you make there's no negative feedback. So if you're familiar with improv, there's a rule that you're supposed to not say no to anything. So the same thing is true in a brainstorming meeting. Once you start saying, we can't do that, then you're shutting down the creativity. And the whole idea is to throw out ideas, build on them, get crazy, get universal in your approach. There's nothing worse than clamping down on somebody's ideas. And just because something sounds crazy, it doesn't mean that it's not going to lead to something brilliant. So you might laugh and say, oh, wow, that's nuts. But then somebody could say, yeah, but, and that's what good brainstorming includes. You also want to focus on quantity of ideas and not just have like your second or third idea be something you think, oh yeah, let's go with that. And then you start polishing that before you've come up with 36 ideas. So it doesn't matter if you think something brilliant, write it down. A big whiteboard is great for brainstorming meetings, but you should keep going, keep pushing, keep pushing. You also don't want to have it be open-ended. So if you're going to have a brainstorming meeting, set a timer, say it's going to be an hour, and then just start letting those ideas flow and encourage big thinking. And what I mean by that is, imagine that you have limitless budget, that you could be advertising at the Super Bowl if you wanted. We all know that none of us can afford that budget, but you should think that big when you're having a brainstorm meeting. Fonts. So I love this graphic. I saw this on Facebook years ago, and I just think it's a perfect example of why a font is important. It's the same text. I will always find you. But in one case, it's a love note, a different font, and suddenly you've got a stalker. So your font choice is really important. There are two basic types of fonts. And I just want to say as a quick aside that you might have already chosen fonts. You might be doing this yourself. You might get overwhelmed by the idea of how much is involved with branding. So I am going to be teaching you some detailed work that you could use when you're doing your own branding design. But it's also, if you hire somebody to do your design for you, then you're going to have the vocabulary to be able to talk to that professional so that you can save some money and time by being able to clearly say to that person what it is you're looking for. So the first category of fonts we're going to talk about are serif fonts. So serif, people aren't really sure where the word came from, although there is a dictionary term that says it's from the Dutch for schrift, which means a line, but not of writing, but not everybody agrees that that's where it comes from. What we do know is that we use it in typography, and what it basically is, if you look at all these letters, so just look at the H in history at the top of the page here. You see how there's these tiny little lines at the top and the bottom of that capital H? Those are the serifs, and that's the extra strokes on the ends of the letter forms. And serif fonts represent history and tradition and honesty and integrity. And I use this type of font if I'm dealing perhaps with medical professionals or a legal office. Sometimes I've used it when we're talking about history. So those might be the reasons that you would use a serif font. These are different types of serif fonts. So again, this is vocabulary. You can see the wedge serif has a little thickness to it. Slab serifs are really thick, like Clarendon. Rounded serif is Cooper. And now we're getting into a category of serif fonts that still have that professional feel. But once you make them rounded, they're a little softer. So that's a really good example of something that's a little bit of both. And then a hairline serif, like with Bodani, one of my favorite fonts, because yes, graphic designers are nerds and we have favorite fonts. And Bodani has kind of the boldest of sans serif, but it has just a little bit of the serif to give it that elegance that a serif font provides. The next category of fonts are sans serif fonts. Sans is the French word for without. So as you can see, this type of font doesn't have those little extra strokes on the letters. And they are seen as being casual and clean and readable and web friendly. I'm a big fan of using sans serif fonts for the internet. Sometimes I'll use a serif font because I'm looking for that more professional feel. But honestly, even in that case, I might bump up the size of the font to make it a little bit more readable because it's not as readable as sans serif fonts. Within the category of sans serif fonts, we've got square fonts. Lemon Milk is a perfect example, and it's probably self-explanatory what it means by square. Very rigid, very square. Lemon Milk doesn't even have a lowercase. That's how committed it is being square. A humanist sans serif, like Bodani, is a little, it's softer than square, but not quite as light as some other sans serif fonts. And it even has a tiny bit of a serif edge to it if you look at the A. So this one, again, I like a good hybrid. So this could be a sans serif font that you could use that's easy to read and a little more casual, but has a little bit of the formality of a serif font. At the bottom left, we've got a grotesque sans serif. It doesn't mean that it's ugly. It's just a term in typography, and it's a little thicker, a little bolder, but still falls within that category of being casual and readable. And then finally, we've got the geometric sans serif fonts. This one is Futura, my personal favorite. I think when I started designing websites, I probably used Futura for like the first half dozen websites. I just love it. I think it's beautiful and classic, and it's got like an Art Deco feel for me. I just think it's gorgeous. Once I realized how much I was using it, I stopped for a few years. And when I came back, it was like a beautiful reunion. I love Futura. The next element of branding is color. I love color. I could talk about color for 6 hours. I'm not exaggerating. There's so much that's interesting about the history of color and how people perceive it, how different cultures perceive it. Unfortunately, I don't have 6 hours with you today, but I do want to underscore how important your choice of colors is, because you're going to be using it in your logo, on your website, in your store if you have one. If you've got staff uniforms, they might be using your colors, social media, ads, everything should be reflecting your choice of colors. So Colors have meaning, and I'll go quickly into some of these. Red is often seen as representing passion, excitement, and anger, and it signifies importance and commands attention. This Dior Hypnotic Poison ad is a perfect example of how compelling red can be. And it's representing exactly what the color should, which is, intense and passionate. It's my favorite color. In the center, we've got orange, which is seen as being playful and full of vitality and friendliness. It's invigorating and energetic, like a good Reese's Piece packaging. If yellow is happiness and youthful and attention grabbing, like a Nesquik bottle. Green is seen as representing growth, nature, it's eco-friendly. It can also represent money. There's a lot of financial logos that use green. In this case, I've got Green Giant. In Hawaii, of course, it's Aina, and it represents our beautiful mountains. And a lot of people in Hawaii use green for a very good reason. Same with the blues, with our beautiful sky and our ocean. Light blue is seen as being tranquil and can represent trust and openness. It can also signify innocence. You might see a lot of pale blue branding with children. Skype uses it. So I guess that's where the trust comes in, because of course you're going to trust anybody using light blue, right? And dark blue is seen as being more professional and formal and mature. You'll see it on police uniforms. Legal offices will use dark blue. Purple is seen as being creative and luxurious and representing royalty. I'm sure you all know that for a long time, purple was only used by the royals because it was so hard to get. That 6-hour class I do on colors, we'll get into that, okay? But it can also be playful and childlike. Hallmark uses purple for their identity, and there they are with their crown because purple is royalty. Pink, again, we're getting back into that gender, but pink is seen as being feminine and youthful and innocent. So this is like the light blue. So that I think that pale blue and pale pink thing, or that boy girl gender stuff, from childhood. But pink can range from modern to luxurious. Here I've got Barbie, but we also had Lyft a little bit earlier with their hot pink. Now we over to the right, we've got brown, which is rugged and earthy, and it has a wide range of feeling from it. It can be affordable or luxurious. I mean, we could be talking about linen or cotton in this example, but it could also be mahogany and something very rich. You might see a lot of coffee ads. Not just the coffee is brown, but there's a lot of warm wood tones. Oh, oops, so sorry. I skipped something because I was trying to go back to say that I also wanted to add that brown is also a great color to be using here in Hawaii because it does represent more of the native Hawaiian art and culture. So if you think about kapa cloth, anything along those lines. So brown is a very good color to use if you're trying to have a native Hawaiian feel to your branding. Gray is seen as neutral, and it can be subdued and classic, serious, mysterious, mature. WordPress, this looks like black, but it's actually a very dark gray. So WordPress is trying to be neutral because they want you and their customer to be the ones that get to express the creativity, and they just stand back and let you do your thing. Black is powerful and sophisticated and edgy and has a luxurious and modern feeling. Gucci is a good example of a black brand. One thing that's important to keep in mind is that there are differences between cultures. That's especially true here in Hawaii, where we have this beautiful blending of different cultures, and we're not all on the same board all the time. So for instance, you're probably not going to show up at a wedding in a white dress, or you're not going to go to funeral dressed in red. So those are some basic American cultures. But when I say American, sometimes I mean mainland. So anytime that you're marketing or branding, you want to keep in mind who your audience is. And there's so many cultural differences about color that it's good to keep that in mind. Here in Hawaii, we do a lot of marketing to the Pacific Rim. So that's going to be a little different from the mainland, or if we're catering to Western Europe, right? So definitely be sensitive to cultural differences, not just in color, of course, but in all your branding and marketing efforts. So when it comes to color, you want to choose 3 basic colors for your branding. The base color should reflect your brand's personality and appeal to your target audience. Then you want to have an accent color, and that's going to pair with your base color and still appeal to your target audience. In this case, we've got a nice aqua and then a dark teal. And then a neutral, which is a background color that can offset both of your base and your accent colors. And I know that you're probably thinking that neutral means white or black or beige or gray, but it doesn't have to. A navy blue is a perfectly good neutral when contrasting with the base and accent colors. You also want to be open to using a variation of those hues for different applications. So something like the accent color that might be seen really well when you've got that white typography against the dark teal background. From a great distance, that's going to really pop. But maybe using the white typography on the aqua is a little less visible from a distance. So you want to think about which colors you're going to use depending on what you're doing. Also, I recommend that when you create your logo, that you have different versions of it. You do want your base color, but there are going to be times where your logo is being used in places that you have no control over. If you're doing any kind of partnership, somebody say, oh, please send your logo, and they're placing it somewhere and you have no control about how your logo is being presented. So I recommend that you have a black version and a white version with a clear background, so that when it's placed in different situations, it's going to look good. And then you can decide which version they're getting, or they might ask. So in addition to those 3 colors, please also have white and black versions of your logo. There's also such a thing as trademarked colors. I don't think that any of you will be trademarking your color, feel free. But there is such a thing, and companies like Tiffany and UPS and Fiskars have actually trademarked their colors. I don't think you're going to get sued if you use those colors, but I recommend steering away from it. But the fact that they trademark their colors shows how really important branding is to these big companies. It should be just as important to you. Shapes are a part of branding that you can use that will consistently represent you. So these are very obvious. We've got the circles, very obvious. We've got the Olympics going on, Target. Microsoft uses the square. These are all different shapes. And what's great about having a shape is that you can use that in different forms. So it doesn't necessarily, so let's take the Twitter bird. They can use the standard logo with their blue bird, or they could use just the shape of the bird and cut it out of a photo. You're still going to know it's the Twitter bird because it's the shape that's important, and not necessarily just the color. So you could be using your shapes in web page backgrounds, layout design, packaging, business cards, stationery, other collateral. If by continuing to use a shape over and over again, it's just making your brand more visible to your audience. Pattern is also something that you can use in your branding. This is a beautiful example from a soap company. So you can see every single package is different. We've got some gorgeous colors, right? So they're like a very rich colors that they're using. And each pattern is different, but they're all gold. So although they're mixing it up with the type of patterns they're using, it's consistently a gold pattern on top of a rich, I would call those rich colors. So that's an option that you can use. Here in Hawaii, again, going back to the kapa cloth, which I really love, or traditional tattoo designs, those are patterns that you can use. You can choose one of those patterns, or you can decide, I really love kapa cloth, and I'm going to use this design in all my branding. And that's limitless, the number of things that you could do with kapa cloth, right? So pattern's a great idea. Imagery is obviously very important. It's important to marketing in general. People are humans, we're visual creatures. So you want to be very thoughtful about your choice of imagery. This is one of our clients, Impact Wealth Solutions, and every month I design a newsletter for them. And the imagery that we choose to use with Impact is always going to be water. So every month I get to go out and choose a beautiful photo of water. Sometimes it's a reflection of the content. And these are their colors, actually the light teal and dark, the aqua and the dark teal that I showed you earlier. And this is an example of what I was talking about when you swap out the colors depending on what you're using. So I'm not going to use the dark teal on top of that dark teal water. It'll just fade away. And I always want things to pop and be readable. One thing I want to say that's really important about imagery is that you need to be very careful about who owns the rights to the photo or clip art that you're using. There are people out there called photo trolls who are waiting to pounce on you for using a photo that you don't own. You can get royalty-free photos. You can actually buy stock photography, which I think is the best way to do it. Not promoting them or getting money back for it, but you can do a very $50 a month from iStock, and you'll get 25 photos and you're protected. You can get Creative Commons is a beautiful organization that offers royalty-free imagery, but sometimes it requires accreditation. And some people are taking advantage of this by presenting a photo as being royalty-free, but you have to scroll way down to the bottom before discovering that they want accreditation. And if you don't give it, you will be getting an email from them asking for $800 for the use of a photo. The photo trolls will pay somebody like $3 or $5 to take photos. They post them up, say that they're royalty free, and then they're looking for people like you to innocently use what you thought was a royalty free photo, only to take you to court. So please, I am begging you, be very, very careful. I have seen this happen, and it takes up all of your time, and it's just a legal mess. So please make sure that you're very careful. Another element of branding is positioning. So if you have an economic brand, then you might want to use bright and value communicating colors like yellow and orange. They should be simple, friendly, and optimistic. So there's the Best Buy logo. Yellow and red, you'll see every time there's a grand opening or going out of business, you're going to see yellow and red because those are really bright and really attention grabbing. However, if you have a luxury brand now, and I should even speak differently because now things are going to be darker and mysterious and exclusive. Look at that gorgeous wine bottle. And of course, all the metallics add another level of luxury. So that, the gold filigree there and the beautiful fonts, which clearly are serif fonts, which you just learned. So positioning is also an element of branding that you should factor in. Another wonderful thing to factor in for your branding are your customer interactions. So for you, this might be something like if you have a product and you're selling them. I buy from Etsy all the time. And what I love about Etsy is most of the people put in a little thank you card. It's often handwritten. They might throw in a sticker or a charm. There's always something. I didn't ask for it. I didn't expect it. It just gives everybody a lovely little feel. You probably don't want to put in glitter or something that's going to be annoying to the person receiving it. Hey, unless you're trying to annoy people, you know, there's always room for that. But the way that you interact with your customers is really important. This photo represents Ritz-Carlton's famous $2,000 rule. So the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain empowers every single one of its employees with $2,000 that they are free to spend on a guest, right? It's a hotel. They can spend up to $2,000 on guests without checking in or getting approval from a manager or anybody else. So for instance, I've read about stories of somebody arriving at their hotel room on a business trip and realizing they didn't have their laptop with them. And the person that showed them their room was able to run out and buy them a laptop for $2,000. I don't know where you can get a laptop for $2,000 these days, but people at the Ritz-Carlton are empowered to take care of their customers. If you've ever shopped in Nordstrom, they're famous for their customer service. The first time I bought something from Nordstrom, this is years ago, because I bought stockings. Who wears stockings anymore? But I got a handwritten thank you card for buying a pair of stockings. And they also, I don't know if they do this anymore, they also used to be famous for taking exchanges or returns for things they didn't even sell. So I don't know who can afford to have that level of customer service, but thinking about your customer interactions is really important. And that goes into all of your branding, all of your interactions, including social media. So some people, for instance, are nervous about being on Yelp because they don't want to see negative reviews. But even if you get a 2-star review, going into Yelp and showing how you deal with that person. I'm sorry you had that experience. Here are the steps we've taken to take care of it, and we hope to see you back. Every time you have that interaction with somebody who's complaining publicly, you're letting everybody else know who reads that this is the type of professional customer service that they can expect when they become your customer. And who doesn't use Yelp? It's some of the first things I do. Like, I would never go to a restaurant the first time without going to Yelp first. So staying off of it might not be the best idea. So when you're building your branding and messaging strategy, you have to, first of all, consider your overall business strategy. I think if you're watching this, that you've already put some mind into your strategic marketing plan. At this point, when we're talking branding, we're really talking about tactics. And I want to know that you already have thought at a higher level of what your strategy is going to be. So anything that you do once you've established that strategy is going to be supported by your branding. So it should be a touchstone, and you should always be coming back to it. Not during a brainstorming meeting, but certainly it's something that you should always be factoring in. You don't want to spread yourself too thin. You want to stay focused and keep to your strategy. Another thing to do, if you're taking any of the HTBC webinars, workshops, or the longer cohort classes, something that we're always trying to repeat over and over again is how important it is to identify and research your target clients and customers. You can do that through customer segmentation. There's a million different ways to do that, but you really need to be able to know who your audience is. It's also really important to research your industry. What are your competitors doing? What is the industry doing in general? There's nothing wrong with being inspired by other people's work. You know the old saying, there's nothing new under the sun. And you know, I'm a creative person, and I never feel like, oh, I can't come up with an idea by myself. But I always do this first thing. If I'm doing a logo for your business, and maybe I haven't worked in that industry, I want to see what other people are doing. Something I recommend is to have a Pinterest board for your own use. You should have one for your own company, which is a whole nother webinar, right? I think we're doing one in May on content marketing, and I can talk more about that now. But for your own creative use, it's nice to, when you're doing this research about your industry and your competitors, you see something you like, pin it so that when you come back around, so let's say you haven't designed your logo yet, and you can look at the way other people are doing it in the industry and what your competitors are doing. And if you see something you like, you're not going to copy it. Obviously, you're not going to just be a clone. You want to be distinctive, but sometimes you can say, "Oh, I like that element of it. I like the way they use the font in this. I like the way they use the color here," and you can start to build a Pinterest board, and not just for your logo, but for any kind of branding. In general, I think it's a really good idea for creativity to be paying attention to marketing. I know that you've got your own business and that's your top priority, but I hope that you're carving a little time out for reading magazines or being online or watching TV or movies, whatever it is, you know, you're Netflixing, Hulu, whatever it is you're doing. And don't just turn away when a commercial comes on. And don't just flip past the ads in the magazine you're reading. You want to, although I'll take that back a little bit, because what you want to do is see what grabs your attention. So I like to read during commercials. So if somebody can make me look up for my book while I'm reading my book during the commercial, then to me, I'm like, ooh, what did they do that got my attention? Very often it's sound. I'm a sucker for silence because I think, oh, my show started again. So I put down my book and then I'm seeing just a lovely understated ad, but I watched it and I stopped what I was doing to pay attention. Really good songs, you know, a good dance tune makes me want to see what's going on. What you want to do is start to collect in your mind all the kind of marketing efforts that people are making that caught your attention so that you can do the same thing with your own branding. When you're developing your positioning statement or considering who your audience is, you want to think about who you're serving and what it is you offer them. It's also like what your niche is in your industry, and you are set apart from your competitors. Also think about why you do what you do. Sometimes just saying, we offer this product or service, it's interesting. You can say what it is that sets you apart from everybody else. But when you talk about your personal story and what got you excited about doing whatever it is that you're doing, that really speaks to people and it gives you a personal connection with your customers or potential customers. So I like to see on websites when people say our story, and it might be something like, well, my grandpa was from Okinawa and he taught me about healthy approaches to life from being Okinawan, and that's why I make la la la. So definitely bring in your story and convey to people what it is that makes you excited about doing what you do. Finally, my last tip is that you understand that it's okay to evolve. Here are 3 great examples of huge companies with major brands that have felt comfortable evolving through time. Look at Apple. If any of you are old enough to remember when Apple started, it was that rainbow color in the 90s, and we got all those Apple computers with the clear hot neon colors in those huge monitors, but they were gorgeous and everybody loved it, and they changed their logo to represent that. Then they kind of switched to black for a while, and then in the 2000s, now we've got this metallic look. I love metallics because metallics, silver, gold, platinum, bronze, brass, whatever it is, I think they always have a little pop to them. So I love, anytime I get a chance to bring in some metallics, I love to do that. And metallics can be a neutral. When we were talking about the different colors, I would even suggest you could always toss in that fourth, which metallic looks really good with your branding, because you might be using that, not all the time, but maybe for special events. So I love when they went silver there, or metallic, whatever it is. Walt Disney, again, 1937, it was just Walt Disney's actual autograph. I'm guessing this was a graphically designed autograph. I don't know if he actually wrote this way. And there might be a little bit of change to his signature through time, but they felt perfectly comfortable evolving through time with their logo. And this is Disney. Same with McDonald's. It started as McDonald's famous barbecue. By the 60s, we got our first golden arches, and that has shifted a little bit through time. But other than that, it's like we know who the golden arches are and who they represent, and we can spot it from a mile away when we see their sign. So just because you've chosen something now, and this gets back to the very beginning when I was talking about your taglines or your logo, is a perfect example of, like, you don't have to be married to your branding as it stands right now, and you should feel free to change whatever you like. It's your company, you get to do what you like. So that's all I have to present today, but I'm very eager to hear your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. So we have a couple questions.
Great.
The first one is, if we give an attribution to the site where we got the photo from, is that enough to relax the photo trolls, or do you think it's better in the long run to pay for the use of a photo?
I mix it up. We mostly rely on stock photography, like those newsletters I showed to you from Impact. Those are stock photos that I consistently buy. However, I've also had clients where I'm doing a newsletter, and especially here in Hawaii, iStock isn't always giving me what I want. And there was a newsletter I did once where we were just giving tips to potential visitors, and I wanted to show them parks, and I couldn't find it through iStock. So in that case, I went through Wikipedia, Creative Commons, and where it said attribution, then it doesn't have to be a title. I did it in very small 8-point fonts in the bottom of the photo, and that satisfies the person. I will tell you, some of the trolls are on Flickr. So I avoid Flickr completely, because their page might say, oh yeah, this is royalty free, feel free to use. And then somewhere in there, they've hidden that it requires attribution, and they're waiting for you not to notice that. So if you really want to be safe, buy stock photography. Otherwise, I've had no problems when I've actually included the attribution.
And then about your advisory against free images, do free images off of nation brand photo stock promos from the site was a few free? Do they fall under the caution note?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah. So about your advisory against free images, do free images off of nation brand photo stock, like promos from the site was a free, I think they're saying there was a few free images available as a promo.
Oh,
do they still fall under the caution note?
No, because if a stock photography place is offering you photos, then it's totally fine to use them. And a lot of these places will give you free stuff every month. iStock does that. I'm a big fan of creativemarket.com. They don't do photos so much, but they're a great source for graphic design, clip art, and there are photos. They always, okay. I really love Creative Market. Again, not being paid by them, but every Monday morning they send me 6 free things. So there's always a font, there's always some clip art that seems to be seasonal. So in October I got Halloween and Christmas, I got holiday stuff. And I probably got free stuff from them for a year before I actually bought anything from them. I ended up getting their infographics package. I've also used templates through creativemarket.com. So there are definitely places that are legitimately offering free stuff that you can use. Pond 5 is also great for free videos. So I could give you a long list, and maybe I should do that. I should have included that, but there's plenty of places to get free stuff that's
Great.
legit.
So we've been asked to make our product name a verb like Google, Kleenex, and Xerox. Recommendations as to how to achieve this goal are welcomed.
Well, first of all, anything can become a verb. Google is not actually a verb. We made it a verb. I actually saw one of the founders of Google speak, and it was a misspelling. It's supposed to be the word G-O-O-G-O-L. to represent a number. It's not a verb, but the person who suggested the word didn't know how to spell it. So Google is not a verb. It's not even a real word, but now we all Google things. So, you can go back to those power words that I presented to you. Like I said, thesaurus is really great, but it doesn't have to be a verb. You can make it a verb. So you know, I'm gonna lift to work. I'm going to let's DoorDash our dinner. You know, everything can be a verb. So I don't know that you need to stick to technically using a verb. It's a great idea because verbs have action. So I love the concept.
Great. Do you ever do branding teardowns, like evaluate logos and branding for improvement?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because things can get dated with time, and something that might look really in the 80s or 90s, you could have been using neon colors and particular fonts. And as I've mentioned before, so many of these companies, Microsoft started out with that kind of like a Star Trek kind of font. And over time, you know, they simplified it more and more. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in your opinion, what would be the typical time it would take to get impact in your branding through television and radio advertising? Say, for example, a new vitamin supplement to the market.
Oh, that's really, really hard to predict. And I would have to know more specifically about your industry to be able to answer that. Everything takes time. And sometimes when people start marketing and branding, they think it's going to turn everything around in a month or two. I would say you should expect a minimum of 6 months before you can have any kind of impact on your branding. One thing that you should do is track your branding. You can do that through Google Analytics. And you can actually search on your own terms, search on your industry, search on your competitors to see where you're coming up in the results. And at first, if you're just starting, it's going to be low and no one's going to know who you are. But you have to know where you are to begin with, so you have a baseline and you can start to track your progress. But 6 months minimum before you see any kind of impact.
Okay, great. Besides Shopify, do you have any additional resources to help with tagline creation?
I think you should Google it. You want to do that anyway, because you want to make sure that when you do have an idea, that somebody else isn't already using it, because you don't want to be a copycat and you want to be distinct. So I don't have any other ideas, like a tool the way that the Shopify tool is. It's really good. Check it out. But I would definitely Google it. It's kind of a boring response. I'm sorry, but it's how I would do it.
Right. And what programs do you use to create your newsletters, logos, graphics, etc.?
Well, we have the Adobe Creative Suite. So, you know, I'm a designer. I can't imagine not having those tools. If I'm designing an illustration or clip art, even with typography, I want to be in Adobe Illustrator because it allows me to maneuver things. It's bitmapped. Object-oriented, I'm sorry. And Photoshop I use all the time. And honestly, if I could only have one program, it would be Photoshop, because everything can be done in Photoshop and I love it. But if you don't have Creative Suite, because it's expensive and I get that, Canva has just come out. I have some concerns about Canva because it seems to me that within 2 or 3 months of Canva coming out, I can spot a Canva design in a heartbeat. I think over time, more and more people will be providing different templates to Canva that will change that. But right now I'm seeing a lot of beige and earth colors, and the same fonts over and over again. So Canva is great. It's so easy to use. It's free. The templates are getting better and better. They have infographics templates now. Just be sure to use your branding. Don't just take their template and run with it. You've already chosen your colors, stick with those. You've already chosen your typography, so stick with those. But I highly recommend Canva, not being paid.
Right. Yeah, I know. Here at Innovate Hawaii, we use Canva a lot to design our graphics and posters. It is pretty user-friendly.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. So are there any local photographers / websites that offer stock photos either for free or charge? Do you know of any?
Oh gosh, oh, you've busted me, because I know that there is a stock photography that is here in Hawaii. I'm so, say again? Pacific Stock. Thank you, somebody's chiming in, Pacific Stock.
Right.
That's the one you can use. Another thing to remember if you're using iStock, because one of the things that we're always doing is we are catering to the people of Hawaii and Hawaii businesses and Hawaii customers. If you just search on Hawaii for iStock, you're going to get a lot of blondes in bikinis on the beach, but that's a beautiful image for Hawaii and it's what tourists experience. But here in Hawaii, you know, those aren't representing the Hawaiian families. But you can actually click in the left-hand column and you can choose ethnicity. So every time that I'm doing anything through iStock, I'm clicking on all the people that represent Hawaii so that I don't get nothing but beautiful blondes on the beach.
Great pointers. And that seems to be the end of our questions, which is great because we're right at the 10 o'clock mark. So thank you so much, Laura.
Mahalo. I really, really appreciate everybody who came here today, and I wish you success in your businesses.
Great. And Mana Means will be teaching a two-part strategic marketing and communications planning workshop for us. It will be Friday, February 18th and 25th from 8 to 11 a.m. over Zoom. And Janet from Mana Means will be walking participants through the process of creating a strategic marketing plan for their companies, which is a roadmap for achieving your company's marketing goals. So the two-part workshop does have a fee of $50, and it includes also one-on-one consultations with Mana Means. So the perfect time to pick, you know, their brain on your content marketing and your strategy. So thank you, Laura, for that.
Thank you, everybody.
And I will email the links to the program to everyone who registered. So thanks, everyone, and have a great day. Mahalo.
Mahalo.